Today's devotion is the very last day of the book of Jeremiah, and we are just trucking on through, and I'm excited to end this book with this special message. I titled today's devotion, Courageous Love. We are on day 161, and we are on June the 10th, and today's morning rinse is the last two chapters of the book of Jeremiah. We're reading in our morning rinse Jeremiah 51 and 52. So go ahead and read that, please, and come on back if you haven't read that yet. And we're going to talk about the featured verse, which is Jeremiah 51:15. It is he who made the earth by his power, who established the world by his wisdom, and by his understanding he stretched out the heavens. When he utters his voice, there is a tumult of waters in the heavens, and he causes the clouds to ascend from the end of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain and brings forth the wind from his storehouses. Have you ever experienced a loved one who chose a destructive path for their life? Despite your warnings and implorations, despite your family and friends, and warning about their behaviors, despite maybe pastors and teachers, despite, other voices around that have, shed light on their behavior, they still choose a destructive path for their life. I have too. It is easy for their choices to cause our hearts to agonize daily in pain for what we see happening, whether it be, a child, whether it be a relative, whether it be a close friend or someone else. Watching them make choices that destroy their lives or has the potential to destroy their life is literally one of the hardest things that we can go through, in my opinion. While we cannot control their actions, what we can control is our responses. We can pray for them daily. We can speak words of wisdom. Whether or not they want to listen to it, we can still speak words of wisdom over them. We can love them every opportunity possible. These types of responses are examples of courageous love, just like Jesus. In my opinion, Jeremiah was a true example of this kind of deep love, especially since all those people were around him denying his wisdom, and they would even reject him and what he had to say, and they even abused him both verbally and physically when he tried to correct them. I mean, doesn't that sound like Jesus? Even though he knew these types of rebellious responses from the people he loved would probably never stop, he continued. And I'm not saying that because there was a lack of hope there. I'm sure that he changed some people's lives. I would like to think that, but for the most part, not 100% of all these people changed. Most didn't. And he realized that their behaviors would probably never stop because that was the message that God told him to say. If you're not going to change, this is what's going to happen. And they weren't changing. But did he stop? No. He continued. He never quit trying, just like Jesus. Throughout the chapters of the book of Jeremiah, we read about him describing to the people the consequences of their choices, as well as who God is as the King of Kings, making every single effort to get the people to listen and to change their ways. His heart agonized over the nations around him because he knew their path of destruction was clear to see. Despite them ignoring his warnings and despite them abusing him, he continued loving them anyway by courageously speaking out. Oftentimes we think that courageous love is just accepting the person and loving them, in the midst of whatever they are doing. But no, Jeremiah courageously loved them by courageously speaking out. From the outside looking in, it may appear that he was unsuccessful in his mission to change lives. With every turn that he made, every step that he took, every prophecy he spoke, nothing seemed to make an impact in their rebellious hearts. And with rejection and abuse and name calling right at his doorstep, it's easy to speculate that his life of courageous love for the people was in vain, and he failed in his efforts to impact them towards a different path. It's easy to think that. But his success was not measured in whether the people responded to his prophecies. His success was measured by his obedience to speak when God told him to speak. His success was measured by God, not man. I once heard a person describing what true success is, and oftentimes we think of success as monetary gain or elevations or promotions or, awards or accolades or whatever. And I think I've mentioned this in a previous episode, but success is walking out who God made you. That's true success. Knowing that God, put inside of us a purpose. Each of us has a purpose, and success is obeying that purpose and walking it out. And that's how God measures our success. It's not a certain task that got done or whatever. And while that could be a part of our purpose, we oftentimes look at the word success in just a different light than what God does. Jeremiah's success was measured by God, not by man, and not by how we view these stories that are in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah obeyed his call to courageously love by courageously speaking out. And that, my friend, is success. Obedience to what God asks you to do. Jeremiah comes to the end of his journey, and he is still praising God for who he is. He knew from the beginning of his ministry that his life would be hard. I mean, do you remember the very first episode of Jeremiah where he was like, I'm young and I don't know what to say and what am I going to do? He knew that it was going to be hard. And here we are at the very end. He's still praising God, going through all the things that he went through. But he loved the people enough to stay on the path of courageous love. And the question is, will you stay on your path of courageous love regardless of what people say or do to you, regardless of people and how they respond to the things you say? Will you stay on the path of courageous love? Today's challenge to dig deeper as we close out this beautiful book. Is God asking you to follow Jeremiah's example of a life of courageous love? You may never live to see the changes in their lives, but your tangible acts of obedience are key. Living a life of courageous love is going to be difficult. It will be hard because every day you might come across somebody who you speak to and you know that God is wanting you to say something, and they may not respond. They may disobey. They may reject you vocally. They may even abuse you. They may call you names. You may even lose friends. But if that is the life that God is calling you to live, the courageous kind of love, speaking courageously in love, yes, it's going to be difficult, but do it anyway. Tonight, when you pull out your journal and you are reflecting about this challenge and really searching your heart on what it means to you to live a life of courageous love, write down what God spoke to you today about tangible ways that he wants you to courageously love someone in your life. What are those tangible ways that you can courageously love someone in your life? We just finished this hard book. Jeremiah is constantly, throughout the chapters, continually preaching and reminding the Israelites the choices that they're making will lead to destruction. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine having that call on your life? And yet here we are at the end of the book. Jeremiah, despite all of it, despite how he was treated and all of it, he's still singing praises to God. He's still shouting who God is. He's still saying these words. It is he who made the earth by his power, who established the world by his wisdom, and by his understanding he stretched out the heavens. When he utters his voice, there is a tumult of waters in the heavens, and he causes the clouds to ascend from the end of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain and brings forth the wind from his storehouses. Jeremiah courageously loved these people and courageously spoke out truth. But he loved God more, and it shined in how he was living and his obedient choices. Will we be that way too? Will we live a courageous love type of a lifestyle? Yes, it will be difficult, but let's do it anyway. I pause because just the other day, I got notification of something that I did not ever want to have, and that was the notification that one of the special mentors in my life went home to be with Jesus. His name's Gary Sperling, and if any of you follow me on social media, you saw my tribute to him back on May the 26th. And that tribute was a reminder, of who Gary Sperling truly is. And just to give you kind of an idea, I met him when I was a single mom, and I wanted to take some Bible classes and get some Bible training. So I took some Bible classes from my church that I was, new at. I had moved to this church, and my daughter was just about 5 years old, and my firstborn, and we were there going, as a single mom, we were going there, and I met him, and instantly I was a little afraid of him. So I could kind of relate to, probably some of these people were a little bit afraid of Jeremiah or some of these other prophets that we study. And I was a little afraid of him, not physically, but spiritually. And I felt like every single time he looked at me and talked with me and looked in my eyes, he had this like piercing way to look right through into my soul. And he could tell like what my issues were. He literally could point them out just within a few conversations. He was just that in tune. And there were people in the church that did not like that. They enjoyed his prophetic, side to him. And when he would speak out in words of prophecy in the sermons, they always would love what he had to say. But when it came down to their individual issues, a lot of people did not like that. But he was such a giant. And yet there were also a lot of people that received him and what his messages were. And I loved Gary Sperling. He was very, very special to my heart. I grew to get to know him better. I grew to just enjoy his wisdom that was imparted into me so many times through the course of the years that I knew him. And he became a mentor to me and his wife. And yet there was it wasn't just a mentorship. I believe that Gary Sperling had a strong prophetic gift over his life, and he carried a mantle over his life that displayed on so many people. And, he courageously loved the body of Christ. And he was a modern day person who I can just think of as an example. And I'm sure that you can think of examples as well. And I always enjoyed him. And so he ended up marrying Nathan and I as the officiant. And through the years, he's just been a powerhouse in our lives. And as you age, you get sick, and he passed. And so this last episode of the book of Jeremiah is kind of a reminder of who he is. He passed back on May the 25th, 2025. And as I was writing, a little bit about him and just reminiscing, I realized that the date that he passed, 5/25/25, had 3 5s in it, and 5 is the number of grace. And I want to live a courageous, loving life with triple the grace. I want to have grace for people, and I want it to be triple. And that's what I feel like Gary Sperling was to me, is that he had power and grace, and I was able to glean just an inkling of that from him. And I want to give that back to people, just like you, I know, want to give that back to people as you grow. And so as we close out the book of Jeremiah, remember those people who were so impactful to your growth. And then even though we have people in our lives that make choices that we would not want them to make, and even though we have people in our lives that could make choices that destroy their relationship with God, or that make choices that hurt them physically, or that can affect the relationships that they have, even though that could very well be the case, be like a Gary Sperling, be like a Jeremiah, and courageously love the body of Christ and even those outside of the church body. Courageously love and courageously continue to speak out and never be silent. And that's my imploration to you today, because you never know what kind of life you will change by just continually speaking out courageously. And then tomorrow, we are going to start on the book of Job. What a journey Job had. And I'll be touching on some nuggets in the book of Job. And I hope that you come back and continue to grow every single day in our walk in faith. And until tomorrow, keep rinsing, reflecting, and repeating. God bless you.